But before we dive into the disturbing tales of the night, let me ask you, do you have the courage to stay until the end? Most viewers don't subscribe to the channel, perhaps out of oversight, or perhaps because, after hearing these stories, they never slept the same way again. If you think you can handle it, click subscribe now. My name is Ethan. I'm 23 years old and I work at McDonald's. I started this job to pay for college, and overall it's a pretty chill gig. But after what happened, I never looked at the night shift the same way again. It was a normal early morning, with few customers, until an old beat-up car pulled up to the drive-thru. The engine coughed, almost dying, and the dashboard lights flickered like thunder about to go out. The driver's side window slowly went down, and I saw a man. He looked to be in his 50s, too thin, with pale skin and sunken eyes, like he hadn't slept in days. He looked at me with a strange smile and said, "Finally, I found you." I was confused. I'd never seen this guy before. "What can I get for you, sir?" I asked, trying to ignore the bad feeling. He placed his order and kept staring at me the whole time without blinking. After I got the food and handed it to him, he held my hand for a second longer than he should have and murmured, "See you soon, Ethan." I quickly dropped the tray and closed the drive-through window. He chuckled softly and sped off, disappearing down the road. I tried to forget about it, but the next night he came back, and the night after that. Every night the same car, the same low laugh. My co-workers started to notice and even joked, saying I had a secret admirer. But then he started waiting for me after my shift. One Friday, around 3 a.m., I was leaving McDonald's when I saw his car parked across the street. The engine was off, and the headlights were just two black holes pointed at me. I quickened my pace, trying not to show fear. As soon as I passed the parking lot, I heard a click and the sound of the car door opening. "Hey, Ethan." The tone was honeyed and at the same time cold, as if he were calling me to something inevitable. I ran without looking back. I locked myself in my house and stayed awake all night, waiting to hear knocking on the door. But he didn't come. The next night, with an hour left in my shift, I went to the storage room to get a bag of frozen fries. The freezer was in the back of the restaurant, away from the cameras, and it always made a metallic noise when someone entered. I grabbed the bag, closed the door, and when I turned around, he was there. The man from the car, inside the restaurant. He was looking at me with those sunken eyes and a smile that was too wide. The red McDonald's uniform was stained with fries and sauce, as if he had come from a shift that never happened. "You made me run last night," he said, taking a step forward. "But you can't run away forever." I dropped the bag of fries and ran. I went through the kitchen and reached the counter, yelling for my co-workers to call the police. When I looked back, he was no longer there. The security guards searched the entire restaurant and found no one. Not even on the security cameras. Only, later that night, one of the employees found something in the storage room. A McDonald's name tag, old, worn, with a faded photo. The name on it? Ethan Williams. My name. My name is Logan. I'm 22 years old, and I work at the McDonald's in my neighborhood. The overnight shift has always been quiet, aside from some drunk customers and delivery drivers in a hurry. But nothing prepared me for what happened that night. I was cleaning the playground, that area full of slides and balls where the kids play. It was late, so there weren't many families, just a mother with two children, a boy and a girl, both young, maybe 5 or 6 years old. While I was cleaning, I noticed the older girl whispering in the younger one's ear. She was looking at the corner of the ball pit and whispering something while the younger sister just shook her head negatively, looking scared. I pretended I didn't see and continued my work, but then the mother called her children and they ran to her. Everyone except the older girl. She stayed sitting in the middle of the ball pit, looking at me with a strange smile. "Hey, your mom is calling you," I said. She kept staring at me. Something about that girl bothered me deeply. I went to the mother and told her that her daughter was still inside. She looked at me, confused, and replied something that made me freeze from head to toe. "Daughter, I only have these two." The blood drained from my face. "But the older girl..." I tried to argue, but the woman held her children's shoulders tightly. "They are my only children." I slowly turned around to look at the playground. It was empty. The girl had vanished. I searched every corner of the structure, looked inside the tunnels, under the slides, even inside the hole where the children used to throw their shoes. Nothing. I knew I had seen that girl. She was there. I went back to the mother, and now she seemed even more scared than I was. What did she look like?" she asked quietly. I described the girl: long, dark hair, pale skin, wearing a grey dress and black shoes. The woman stood still, squeezing her children's hands tightly. "That's Luna, my daughter's imaginary friend." My heart skipped a beat. "Are you sure? My daughter has been talking about this Luna for months. She says that she lives in dark places and that she appears at night, but I never imagined that anyone else could see her." She held her younger son in her arms and hurried away, while her younger daughter looked at me, as if she was asking for help. I was shaking. But the worst came later. When I went back inside the restaurant, one of my co-workers looked at me and laughed. "Dude, that's so funny. When you were in the ball pit area, someone knocked on the kitchen door and kept whispering, 'Logan.'" I froze. "Who was it?" "I don't know. When I looked at the camera, there was no one there." That night, I went home early. But when I went to sleep, I had a horrible dream. I was trapped inside the playground. The place was dark, and all the balls were grey. In the middle of them, there she was, the girl in the grey dress. She was looking at me and smiling like that night at McDonald's. But this time, she whispered something. "Now you can see me too." I woke up in a cold sweat, and since then, every time I close my eyes, I see a silhouette watching me in the corner of the room. My name is Noah, and I've worked at McDonald's for almost 2 years. The overnight shift can be tiring, but I never minded it. What happened that night, however, made me never want to stay late again. It all started when a man walked into the restaurant around 1 a.m. He was wearing an old, dirty coat, looked rumpled, and carried a huge black suitcase. His appearance already made me uncomfortable, but I tried to ignore it. He ordered a hamburger and kept watching me as I took his order. He didn't look at the menu or his cell phone. He just stared at me fixedly, as if he were analyzing every detail of me. When I handed him the food, he held my hand for a few seconds before taking the tray. "Do you guys work here alone?" he asked, smiling. I laughed awkwardly and said that there were more employees. But something in the tone of his voice made me feel real fear. He sat down in the back of the restaurant, near the window. But he didn't eat. He just stayed there, watching. Marco, my co-worker, noticed it too. "Dude, that guy is giving me the creeps," he whispered. I tried to ignore it, but after an hour, he was still there. Not eating, not looking at his cell phone, just watching us. Then he got up, came to the counter. He put the black suitcase on it and opened it slowly. At that moment, my entire body froze. Inside, there was a huge butcher knife. He put the knife on the counter, smiled, and stared at us. The entire restaurant went silent. Marco took a step back, and Don Hector, our manager, tried to stay calm. "Sir, the restaurant is closing. We need to ask you to leave." The man picked up the knife and put it back in the suitcase. Then he walked slowly back to his table and sat down again, as if nothing had happened. Marco pulled me aside and said, "We need to call the police." But Don Hector stopped us. "If he realizes we're calling, he might react badly. Let's close and lock everything up. When we get out, we'll call the police." That was the tensest moment of my life. We finished cleaning as quickly as possible, while that man stayed there, unblinking, without saying a word. When we finally turned off the lights, he got up, picked up the suitcase and walked to the door. But before leaving, he stopped, looked at me and smiled. "We'll see each other soon." Then he left, disappearing into the darkness. As soon as he was gone, we ran to lock everything up and called the police. When they arrived, we told them everything and showed them the security cameras. But what we saw chilled us even more. In the recordings, the man doesn't appear entering the parking lot. He didn't get out of a car, nor did he come walking down the street. He simply appeared at the door of the restaurant, as if he had come out of the darkness. And the worst part, the police told us that that man died 2 years ago. He was found dead in a cheap motel with the same black suitcase next to his body. To this day, I wonder, what was inside that suitcase that night? And more importantly, what did he want to do to me? My name is Lucas. I'm 24 years old, and I've been working at McDonald's for a little over a year. The overnight shift can be tiring, but it's always been quiet. Until the night everything changed. It was one of those hectic days, full of customers coming from parties, drunks, impatient people wanting food fast. I was in the kitchen preparing orders when I heard a commotion at the register. I looked over to see a tall, thin woman wearing a grimy black dress. She seemed wrong. I can't explain it. Her hair was disheveled, her skin pale, and her eyes full of hatred. She pushed her way through the customers and started banging on the counter. "Give me my order! Now!" My co-worker, Carla, tried to calm her down. "Ma'am, you need to wait your turn." The woman locked eyes on her and something changed in the atmosphere. The air became heavy. The silence in the restaurant was oppressive. The woman smiled, a smile that was too wide, too wrong, almost impossible. Then, before anyone could react, she jumped onto the counter and grabbed Carla's hair with absurd strength. Carla screamed. The woman tore out a clump of hair and held it in her hand as if it were a trophy. And then she simply walked away. She didn't run. She just left, ignoring the customers, ignoring the security guards, as if no one could stop her. She disappeared into the darkness of the street. We called the police, but when they checked the security cameras, she wasn't there. In the recordings, Carla screams and her hair is pulled by something invisible, but the woman doesn't appear. It was as if she had never existed. Since that night, Carla began to wither. At first, it was headaches, frequent colds. Then she started to lose weight in a terrifying way. The doctors couldn't find anything wrong, but she seemed weaker and weaker. Then came the worst. One night, Carla was in a car accident. But the medical report pointed out something even stranger. She didn't die from the impact. Her heart simply stopped. Out of nowhere. The most bizarre thing. Shortly before the accident, Carla sent me a message. "Lucas, I saw her again, in the mirror. Since then, I can't stop thinking about that woman. What did she want? Why did she tear out Carla's hair? And more importantly, can she come back to get someone else?" My name is Rodrigo. I'm 24 years old, and I work at McDonald's in Hermosillo, in northern Mexico. If you've ever been around here, you know we're surrounded by the Sonoran Desert. Long roads, dust, and things you don't want to see at night. But nothing prepared me for what I experienced that early morning. It all started with a strange customer. It was 2:40 a.m. and we were closing the drive-thru. It was just me, Jorge, my co-worker, and Don Miguel, the manager. That's when an old rusty car pulled up to the drive-thru window. The window rolled down very slowly, creaking, and inside, in the driver's seat, was a man, or something resembling one. He was tall, very thin, with a long face, dry skin, and eyes that were too deep set. But what really bothered me was the way he smiled, too wide, too big. He tilted his head strangely and asked, "Are you still serving meat?" I looked at Jorge, and he was tense too. Yes, we are. The man didn't blink. I want something fresh. I felt a chill in my stomach. You want a hamburger? He chuckled softly, a harsh sound like he had rocks in his throat. No, something more alive. My body froze. Jorge squeezed my arm discreetly. Don Miguel, who was further back, asked, "Sir, do you want to order or not?" The man twisted his neck at an odd angle and replied, "Maybe I'll be back soon." Then he sped off in the car and disappeared down the road. But the worst was yet to come. 3:17 a.m. We were closing everything up, feeling a little calmer when we heard noises outside. Footsteps, fast, but they didn't sound human. "What the hell?" Jorge muttered. I looked through the glass of the entrance door, and my hair stood on end instantly. Outside, something was standing on the sidewalk. It was him. But something was wrong. The face seemed distorted. The skin was stretched, as if it didn't belong to the body. The arms were very long, and the worst part, his eyes were black as coal. He smiled, and then he imitated my voice. "Jorge, can you open up for me?" I almost threw up. The sound was identical to mine. Jorge's eyes widened. "What the hell is that, Rodrigo? How did he do that?" I didn't know, but Don Miguel knew. The old manager went pale instantly. "Don't look at him, don't look at him." We lowered our heads immediately. Don Miguel locked all the doors and turned off the lights in the restaurant. The sound of silence was unbearable, but then, bam, bam, bam! The thing banged on the window and used my voice again. "Jorge, please, I'm out here. Open up for me." I was trembling. Jorge whispered prayers softly. Bam, bam, bam. The thing was hitting harder. And then, suddenly, silence. We waited 5 minutes, then 10 minutes. When we finally looked out the window, there was nothing there anymore. But in the dust on the sidewalk, there were huge animal hoof prints. Hooves, like a deer. But deer don't walk on 2 legs. Skinwalker. Don Miguel closed his eyes and whispered, "It's looking for meat." The next night, Don Miguel didn't show up for his shift. The McDonald's got a new manager. We never heard from him again. As for me, I quit 3 days later, but to this day, whenever I hear footsteps late at night, I feel like that thing is still around. Maybe waiting, maybe hunting, maybe looking for meat.